and it's also a signal to the Malaysian football authorities that they have to really speed up or catch up on their youth development to get more Arif Aimans on board. Because right now, only Arif Aiman is worthy of that starting 11 where it's majority foreign. Let us not kid ourselves on that. Only Arif Aiman. If Malaysia had produced 50 Arif Aimans, would TMJ have resorted to naturalizing those players? I doubt it. He'll be happy to see those 50 Arif Aimans given the squad depth, maybe Team Malaysia A, Malaysia B, whatever, to have such frightening squad in depth to frighten the rest of the national teams, even with heritage players, to scare them into retreat into their own goal before they even try to play. When Malaysia defeated Vietnam 4-0 in the second AFC Asian Cup 2027 qualifying match at the Bukit Jalil National Stadium on 10th of June, euphoria was the dominant mood inside the arena. But away from the 90 minutes of action where the Tigers were dominant from start to finish, questions abound over the latest batch of foreign recruits who have joined the Malaysian national team this year. Among the 5 new recruits that featured in this game, 4 of them started this match and 1 of them came out as a reserve. And they all played instrumental roles in helping Malaysia overcome Vietnam for the first time in over a decade. Yet, with this continued naturalization or induction of heritage players in the Malaysian national squad, questions have abound, especially with the latest batch of new players in the Harimau Malaya squad. And that win had led to mixed reaction among the Malaysian football fans, with one of them, University of Malaya academic Noor Aslan Ghani, lamenting that Harimau Malaya is now almost dead, only in name, in a Facebook post 2 days after this win that kept Malaysia on top of Group F, and already you can say half a foot towards successive back-to-back qualifications to the Asian Cup finals. Why does this latest batch of recruits lead to such mixed reactions, even as they acknowledge the 4-0 victory, which was so comprehensive and perhaps in a way unprecedented, but at the same time evoke uneasy feelings among the local football fans? Tanya Je attempts to find out how this controversy came about and why did Tunku Mahkota of Johor, who is the main person overseeing this currently independently run Harimau Malaya project since it was started last year, to understand how this all came about. When it comes to naturalizing players or inducting heritage players, which I mean those players who are considered heritage, they have at least one parent who is a Malaysian born, either a parent or a grandparent, which is legal according to the current FIFA rules when it comes to football players switching nationalities to represent their adopted country. And this, for Malaysia, it has been in place since the mid-2010s when Brandon Gunn became the Australian-born midfielder, became the first foreign-born player to receive his Malaysian passport and eventually feature with distinction for the Harimau Malaya in the from 2016 until the Asian Cup finals last year held in Qatar. And this led to a massive explosion of heritage players who eventually come forward, including the current Malaysian captain Matt Davis, Levar Combin Ong, who scored one of Malaysia's 4 goals in the rout, and as well as naturalized players such as Paulo Jose, who was a substitute in that game, and Romel Morales was an unused substitute. Those guys who entered through the naturalized route, they have fulfilled at least 5 years of residency in Malaysia, and they do want to compete for. They have that desire. That's why they are given Malaysian passports and ICs to compete for Malaysia in the international football stage. However, this year there is a different type of foreign recruits who enter the Malaysian national team, and even though Tunku Mahkota of Johor, or TMJ as he's known, has specifically mentioned last year that he aims to bring in 7 new recruits in this first phase of strengthening the national team. These 7 who eventually came have played significant parts in either or both of Malaysia's victories in the Asian Cup qualifying so far. But here's the big but. Yet questions abound over where do these 7 come from? Who are they? Unlike the previous lots of foreign-born players who have been involved with the Malaysian national team either through ancestry or the naturalization route, these 7 come out of, you can say, for the average local Malaysian football fan, out of nowhere. And these 7 who were involved in the 2 Asian Cup victories over Nepal and Vietnam this year, they are as follows. The first of 7 players to make his debut for Harimau Malaya this year was Netherlands-born midfielder Hector Havel, who has quickly established himself as a main fulcrum in the middle of the park. He was subsequently later joined by Gabriel Palmero, a Spanish-born player who is versatile, either playing as a fullback or in defensive midfield, and make his debut in this month's friendly against Cape Verde at the Kuala Lumpur Football Stadium. Then these 5 came along, the quintet, who came, you can say in a way, for those who do not know any better, a bit out of nowhere. They are Facundo Garces and John Irazabal, both of whom are Spanish-born. João Figueiredo, who is a Brazilian-born striker, and 2 Argentine-born players, midfielder Emmanuel Matucha and Rodrigo Holgado, who is a leading top scorer in the Colombian league. These 5 players, when selected after FIFA gave them clearance on the eve of the game against Vietnam to be included in the matchday squad, they played instrumental roles in helping the hosts gain their first victory over Vietnam in over 10 years. But prior to this year, none of the 7 have appeared in Malaysia at all. And the mystery deepens, even though Hector Havel has subsequently revealed that he has a grandfather from Malacca and is preparing to join Johor Darul Takzim for the upcoming season. But still, questions abound, because this type of naturalization or influx of heritage players is shrouded with questions, admittedly, because for the local football fans, unlike your Brandon Guns or Matt Davis, Corbin Ongs, they do not have a certain distinct Malaysian look. They look so European or Latin American in their outlook and in their body language, even though their football education and abilities are way above many of the locals who are currently playing in the Malaysian Super League. And I think for some of the local football fans who are feeling that Malaysia is now fielding a United Nations or all foreign national team, that game against Vietnam, they had only 2 local born players, both from Johor Darul Takzim, goalkeeper Shihan Azmi and superstar winger Arif Aiman, who contributed 2 assists in the 4-0 rout of Vietnam. And as more questions are being asked about this whole meaning of the naturalization process, before we go into debate like how the other fans do, Tanya Che attempts to give a take on what we think is behind this rationale in bringing in those 7 players. Because unlike the traditional route of having a Malaysian parent or grandparent or having stayed in Malaysia for 5 years, there is actually another path which fits actually into one of the 2 requirements. Since neither of the 7 players who made their debuts for Malaysia this year have stayed in Malaysia for more than 5 years, it is pretty clear that they have likely come through the heritage route. But yet, to an extent, how they have come about is possibly a mystery. The mystery is probably which grandparent, whether it's the paternal or the maternal grandparent, is a Malaysian or was a Malaysian before switching nationality. Because in these days, international football is being increasingly filled with teams where, particularly in Asia, where they actually naturalize players through this route, and in a way at times rather unconventional too. And we can look no further than the United Arab Emirates for such an example, where a recent Emirati international, Mackenzie, let me see, yeah, I think it's Mackenzie, yes, Mackenzie Hunt, who was called up to the Emirati national team for the first time last year. And this is rather ironic because this player is born in Liverpool, has had academy training at Everton, and is currently playing professional football with English league side Fleetwood Town. And yet he got called up by UAE. How did it all happen? As it turns out, during his formative years, due to his parents working as expatriates in Dubai, Mackenzie Hunt was actually enrolled in this Dubai international school, which is at the Dubai English speaking school for his education, and also his early football training at the GoPro Academy there before he went on to further his football education at Goodison Park. So he had spent at least 5 years of his childhood at the Emirates, which led to him being naturalized by the Emiratis through this particular route, which is in line with how FIFA requires any footballer who wants to switch international allegiance to have stayed at least 5 years in a different country if he does not qualify through the heritage route, which is through the ancestry of the parent or grandparent. Yes, only parent and grandparent, but not great-grandparent and beyond. Otherwise, players will come up with ridiculous claims that this so and so comes from some kampong in Kepada or some fishing village in Muar or some Dayakan tribe in Sarawak so many centuries ago, and the list will go on and on. I think it's clear that FIFA does not want the insanity of just naturalizing players just because of some heritage claim which can't actually be documented. But yet still, with those 7, the paperwork was cleared by FIFA, so FIFA allowed those 7 players to play for Malaysia this year. And it's quite clear, take away Havel after he has clarified on his grandfather from either his father or mother's side being a Malaysian, the other 6, 2 are born in Spain And I think you know 3 are born in Spain, 2 from Argentina, and 1 from Brazil. Yep. Where do they get their Malaysian parents from? And let's not go deep into the possibility of some Malaysian have had illegitimate kids when they were away in Latin America or in Spain to get all this going. Because when we want to delve into those familial history, things can get pretty messy. But it's highly possible, actually, that this could have happened. Without wanting to go into details about how these players came about, how do they even have Malaysian ancestry when they do not even have one. But it is highly possible that they have come from, whether it's the sibling of a minister or some other high-ranking personnel or some prominent official whatsoever, and so forth. That's why these 6 players are able to become Malaysians through the heritage route, even though, as many local football fans who are rather aghast at this idea of having an all-foreign national team would have suggested. Yet, at the same time, in getting those 7 players in this season is a major upgrade from what Malaysians have enjoyed under the previous batch of foreign players that they have had from the mid 2010s until now. But still, it doesn't fully explain that there is a method to madness, relative madness, in what TMJ is trying to do in this Malaysians abroad scheme in trying to revolutionize Harimau Malaya and indirectly Malaysian football as a whole. And how do we even reach to this stage where Malaysia fielded 9 foreign-born players against Vietnam at all? I think it all boils down to quite a few things. Why did TMJ take such a route to get these 5 players who are obviously of higher caliber and higher quality than the local players, obviously, and even several of the foreign-born players, That's why not all foreign-born players who have played for Malaysia previously are in the national team. But also in a sense, perhaps yet a blood transfusion to supplement a previous blood transfusion over a number of ailments that are still ailing Malaysian football at this moment. I mean, let's look at it this way. If we look at the current Malaysian national squad at this moment and the current international football system where Malaysia is involved in, save for the successful qualification of the Asian Cup for the first time since 2007 when they were humiliated as co-hosts, and their first direct qualification since 1980, that Malaysian squad that went to Qatar for the Asian Cup finals returned home with 1 point after a thrilling 3-3 draw with South Korea. But yet, having that match doesn't mean that they have qualified for the World Cup. No, Malaysia are not going to the 2026 World Cup finals in North America next year. Way far from it. That's why they are playing the Asian Cup qualifying rounds now. While Indonesia are still moving on their journey to North America, and a bit on Indonesia a bit later. But still, going back to that, because why is there that second transfusion of those, the second mass transfusion actually, to those foreign players? It is highly possible that what has been tried and implemented are either works in progress or they are simply not working. The Malaysian Super League, I mean, local football fans are I think they've gotten a bit tired, although it's quite inevitable that Johor Darul Takzim are that dominant. 11 straight wins in the Malaysian Super League, reaching the knockout rounds in 2022 and 2025 in the AFC Champions League Elite, and other clubs struggling to catch up, particularly with salary arrears and such. And when these issues are not only recent but long-standing chronic problems that they have had, particularly ever since the withdrawal of the Dunhill sponsorship money in the late 1990s, or early 2000s rather, that marked the start of the struggle for Malaysian football clubs to stay relevant, to stay afloat, and especially with the evolution of the political processes in Malaysia in the 2000s, when the previous opposition were making huge headways, took over a number of state governments, including Selangor, and changed the policy in which where the chief minister must also be the president of the state football association. Selangor abolished that practice when Pakatan Harapan, who are still ruling Selangor at this moment, abolished it after Khalid Ibrahim had had enough of this issue when he was in charge. Right now, very few states have chief ministers as their presidents of their respective state FAs. So it's the evolution of the political system that has also infused some kind of evolution in the way football is being run in the various states, and indirectly also changed the dynamics in which football is being conducted in this country. Then you have had the after effects of several decades of subsequent generations not meeting up to the standards of the famed 1970s and early 1980s Malaysian squads that had Daku Sojin An, Dr. Santok Singh, Isa Bakar, Mokhtar Dahari, and the likes. Subsequent generations have not exactly lived up to those lofty heights. And let's us not even talk about the 2007 Asian Cup humiliation. And when the recent national youth age group squads could qualify for Asia intermittently since the mid-2000s, starting with the Aidil Zafwan batch under K. Rajagopal, Aidil Zafwan, Shafiq Rahim, and the lot. But only once or twice have they reached the knockout rounds when they reach the Asian youth finals, whether it's in the under 19 or under 6 or under 16 levels, or even in previous editions under 20 and or under 17. But still, when the youth production line is that poor, it can only mean that the Malaysian football standard is, while slightly improving right now, the system itself, the youth development, but it only can reach this far. Malaysia have not won the Southeast Asian Games gold medal, which is now an under 23 men's tournament, since 2011. They have not won the ASEAN Championship since their only triumph in 2010 under Dr. K. Rajagopal, and coming close again after reaching the final in 2014 under now FAM Vice President Datuk Dola Saleh. When the local coaching standards, when the local playing standards are not exactly up there, and when only Arif Arman has shown that he's capable of playing with those foreign-born outfield players, a lot of questions has to be asked. And it's no surprise that Arif Arman has also thrived under the ownership of TMJ and Johor Darul Takzim JDT. He has exploded into the Asian club football scene as one of the brightest wingers, not just in Southeast Asia, but in Asia, where even East Asian, West Asian commentaries do talk about him from time to time. But he alone had to play international football only at the senior level after being somewhat overlooked when he was in the Mokhtar Dahari Academy, when he transferred from there to join the JDT Youth Development Program and prospered under those high quality foreign coaches at the JDT age group squads from there. And he's one of the rare few who has managed to break through from that ranks after Fazli Mazlan. Yes, only two. it says a lot about how the locals still have entrenched mentalities, entrenched thinking, entrenched mindsets, and perhaps even entrenched methods on how modes on how football should be played, whether it's to Gaelic style or to run to produce moments of brilliant skill to entertain the crowd, which admittedly is a bit dated. And unfortunately, when during that period when Malaysian had fallen so far behind from the heights of the 1980s to where they are now, they needed a lot of catching up to do. And one way to catch up is getting those heritage players and subsequently naturalized players. They had to shatter their own pride of having 100% locals and not having foreigners. And even with those import players, foreign born players who have been with the Harimau Malaya squad for a subsequent period of time, including Dion Kus, Matt Davis, Corbin Ong, Paulo Jose, Romel Morales, there is a limit still. And before the 7 came in, Dion Kus is the best among the foreign born players who have played for Malaysia with distinction. He's of that standard. And with those 7 players who came in this year, it is quite clear that having those 7 allowed Kus to move back to his natural right wing back position where he has played so often at club level. But until Peter Klemoski took over the national team this year, Kus had spent much of his international career playing at centre back. And it's the injection of those high quality heritage players that led to the explosion in the level of the Malaysian national team, which also led to Arif Aiman being able to play his best game, one of his better games for Malaysia. Because, like it or not, fans will always say, why you want to play so many foreign players, why you don't play 11 locals, because they are our flesh and blood, which I'm going to touch a little bit on in what we call the jus sanguinis, which is the right of blood, which a section of Malaysians will definitely talk about at great length, including the University of Malaya academic Noor Aslan Ghani, where they talk about that blood, the Malayan blood. While it's inevitable that locals do want to see the Malayan blood represent their team, their land with pride, the globalization of football has also ensured that if you want to progress, you have to take certain unorthodox methods to reach to this level. And with that's why they had this foreign talent scheme, which also came initially for a period of time under the supervision when TMJ was briefly Football Association of Malaysia president. And right now, the injection has begun in earnest, this second big wave, under his supervision of the independently run Harimau Malaya. So, there is that matter to madness, because given how far Malaysian football at the international stage has fallen, it would take quite a while before Malaysian football regains the respect of the wider Asian football fraternity. And one way to do that is to start winning matches, to claim major scalps, to regain the attention of the Asian football circles for the right reasons, not the wrong reasons like what happened in 2007 when they were humiliated by China, Uzbekistan and Iran in the 2007 Asian Cup finals on home soil, with a local coach, Norizam Bakar, who is probably one of the worst national coaches ever, for leading that kind of humiliation with a low standard of play that opponents had little problem dissecting them without going into third gear, fourth gear, fifth gear whatsoever. And this injection of heritage and naturalized players for that period, from this low level, push them up to a decent level where they are playing in the Asian Cup finals on merit again under Kim Panggon last year. Then now you have Peter Klemowski, who it's quite obvious now, the Australian has a clear tactical plan. He has a clear idea how he wants his team to play from how he has done at previously at club level, and this is why he's able to inject that kind of confidence the way he has, obviously aided by the new players who understand the football at the level that Klemowski wants. After these five were cleared to play for Malaysia on the eve of the Vietnam game. And because these guys carry such a much higher level of football education and experience, which admittedly among the previous group of heritage and naturalized players, Diongkus to an extent perhaps Brandon Gunn, these are the only two who come close to matching. Diongkus definitely hits this level that the new imports are at. Brandon Gunn a little lower, but it's meant to push up higher. And also, for the first time, why did TMJ bring in those seven new players this year? It is in a rather perverse way what the former politician and law academic Zaid Ibrahim said, the real meritocracy of the Malaysia national team, where only those who are in the starting 11 and on the bench are selected on merit, and not because a majority race or some other race or some other group think that they should be in, and some faction of players and officials who believe that I'm adapted to these people and all that. Or even worse, in China's case, the player or the agent had to pay the football association just for that one player to get his only cap for the country, which is documented quite widely even among Chinese football netizens. So it's a huge shake-up. It's a rather mysterious, but it's a huge shake-up in the way how Harimau Malaya want to do things, especially in stepping up in how they want to catch up, in particular how Indonesia in particular, as I mentioned a bit earlier, have successfully done in their current World Cup qualifying campaign, which is still ongoing. They are the only surviving Southeast Asian nation still in contention to reach 2026 World Cup finals in North America next year, even though they are still outsiders to qualify. And how did Indonesia do it? Unlike previous not so well run administrations in the PSSI, Indonesia's Football Federation, the moment former Inter Milan owner and businessman Eric Thohir took charge of the presidency, he himself began a wave of Dutch-born heritage players, naturalized them, obviously with some huge incentives as well, to get them to commit to play for Indonesia, to raise up the standard of Indonesian football dramatically, to the point where previously under Shin Tae-yong and now under Patrick Kluivert, Indonesia are a hard team to play against for the majority of Asia national teams, apart from Japan, who dispatched them quite easily, but that is a different matter. Indonesia were the ones who started this. That's how Malaysia are now following suit. And with Malaysia following suit, we could see Philippines doing yet another way of similar approach, or Vietnam doing this, or Vietnam escalating the naturalization process, or even Singapore, or even your Cambodians and other Southeast Asian nations attempting to do this all over again. But yet, this kind of naturalization, there's those 7 players that Malaysia has brought this year, comes with one or two rather question marks, with the Indonesian football fans ironically feeling super upset over all this matter. Why? Because the Indonesians felt that while their Dutch-born players are legitimate, they have played at good levels in European club football, in the top 2 divisions of the major major football European nations, and having pushed them until the fourth round of the fourth round of Asian World Cup qualifying, still in with a shot of taking one of the 2 slots available for Asia to go to North America next year. They're not happy that Malaysia, their arch rivals, are also doing something similar. And the suspicion over those 7 players, I know they say 5, but to put it in broader context, it's those 7. Those 7 players who have joined Malaysia this year, they felt that there's some kind of under the table deals, but I'm not going to delve into this because I don't believe it is the case. But what I have said before earlier is those 7 come in, they do highly probably have Malaysian heritage, but whether it's their grandfather or the parent, more likely grandparent, could have been who could have migrated there from Malaya, as it was known then, to these far-flung parts of the country, or even in the last century, in the 80s, when Malaysian officials like to go to Latin America for their diplomatic trips. Yes, that's as far as I'm going to push, but I'm not going to push further where that is concerned, because I don't want it to delve into that kind of speculation that will evolve into a never-ending spiral that people may say what conspiracy theory or whatsoever. No, but I'll stop at that part where this is concerned. For the Indonesians, especially the Dutch-born players, they instantly raised the level, even though naturalization is not a new thing for them, having inducted Uruguay-born striker Christian Gonzalez and even Dutch-born midfielder Stefano Lillipali before Thohir took the presidency of PSSI. Yes, they have tried it, but on a rather limited scale, fearing the backlash of nationalism or the right of blood, or say, this is my land, how come these players who are not of this land come and play for us instead? There is always that question mark. And to be told, if we look at the wider Southeast Asia where naturalization or heritage players are concerned, only 2 Southeast Asian nations have yet to naturalize any player at all. 2 out of 11. Myanmar and Brunei Darussalam. They have not started this stage. Brunei, unlikely if ever. Myanmar, also unlikely. These 2. Then, how about the rest? I already spoken about Indonesia. Thailand were late into this heritage process, but they have begun inducting players who largely have a Thai parent or a Thai grandparent. The most notable one being Sharul Sapwis, who was instrumental in Thailand regaining the ASEAN Championship in 2014, and was also a member of the Switzerland national under-17 side that won the FIFA under-17 World Cup, I think in 2003, if I'm not wrong. Yes, that was alongside the likes of Philip Senderos and a few other current Swiss national team players. He's the most prominent, but they go through the heritage route. Then what about your Vietnam? Vietnam, they have only done limited naturalization heritage. Actually, they have begun the heritage program through 2 goalkeepers, Dang Van Lam, a Russian-born goalkeeper, and Philip Nguyen, who hails from the Czech Republic or Czechia. They only began the naturalization process in a slow but very impactful way. Rafaelson, the Brazilian-born centre forward, or known locally as Nguyen Xuan Song, he was instrumental in single-handedly pushing Vietnam all the way to win the recent ASEAN Championship, being emerging as not only the top scorer but also the most valuable player of the tournament. And in the game against Malaysia, they also have another naturalized player, Jason Pandets, who made his first start for Vietnam, or I think second game for Vietnam against the Harimau Malaya. Then what about Singapore? Singapore is actually the first to use naturalized players in the 2000s when we naturalized Croatian born striker Mirko Grabovac, Brazilian born striker Ekman Goncalves, and English born defender Daniel Bennett, who has also spent a significant time in Singapore as a child when he was growing up, while his father was the principal of the United World College here. And subsequent import naturalized players also come along. And only very recently is Singapore edging closer to having its first heritage player. But Singapore citizenship applications are really strict, and the bureaucracy is rightfully rigid because it doesn't want any Tom, Dick and Harry to collect a passport or citizenship without valid reasons, and at times even rejected foreign applicants who have already been set up Singapore as their home for a while, because they want to see who has made substantial economic contributions to the nation before, or contributions to the island nation before it gives out that one of the world's most coveted passports. Then the Philippines came along. After Singapore, the Philippines were the first ones to start the heritage wave, beginning with in 2005 when they 2004 when they had a few British-born players who chose to don the jersey of their adopted country because of their parent, and it all began because of one Filipino who saw these Filipino players on Football or Championship Manager before he became a semi-active or active scout to get those heritage players to come and play for the Philippines, given the huge Filipino diaspora around the world. Then you had Laos, who in recent years also had one heritage striker, and Cambodia in recent years who had a glut of naturalized players because many of them have played in the Cambodian league for at least 5 years and have resided there, so qualifying them for the residency. So I would say all these Southeast Asian countries have pursued either the heritage or naturalized route, or both. Then I already mentioned these two other nations who have not even naturalized a single player, whether it's heritage or citizenship route so far. So what about the one country I've not mentioned? And that is the precautionary tale that Malaysia, Football Association of Malaysia, must be very careful about. Timor-Leste. Timor-Leste made its international debut in 2004 when it competed in the Tiger Cup, the old name of the 2004 ASEAN Championship. Although it did not win any matches, and as a small independent nation where the economy is still trying to get up to a certain level, the Timorese chanced upon this particular scheme, having already used a number of heritage players of Timorese ancestry or heritage to play for the country. They chanced upon this scheme where I think between 2012 to 2016, where they got a glut of Brazilian players to play for Timor-Leste, whether it's for the national team or even the under-23 team. They played for these national teams, these teams throughout that period before one of the opponents, Palestine, made a complaint to FIFA about the rather suspicious nature of these players, and the moment Timor-Leste were punished, they were banned for qualification for the 2023 Asian Cup, and all the results that involved those 10 ineligible players, Brazilians, were declared void, or the victories were reversed to the losing side. So, and not only that, the General Secretary was was barred for a number of years due to his complicit involvement in this offence. And as what former Timor-Leste captain Jesse Pinto, who is Australian born, mentioned in an interview with Australian media in 2015, he has had question marks over those Brazilian players even when he was with the national team in that period, because it felt that those players signed to play for the Timor-Leste national team out of a desperate bid to break out of poverty, break out of their struggling playing careers, and only to be enslaved by their agents to keep playing for them through the falsification of birth records or even passport records, which is a practice while still somewhat in place in a number of nations who are more desperate to falsify ages just to compete. Not Malaysia in this case, because Malaysia does have a clear record of their citizens, the IC and all these things. But still, the Timor-Leste expose is a precautionary tale for Malaysia, because when things do get a bit too obvious, FIFA might investigate. Although when Timor-Leste were punished, it was the FIFA under Sepp Blatter. The current FIFA under its president Gianni Infantino, I don't believe it's going to be the case, because Infantino has sort of sold FIFA all the way to the Saudis and has bended over so many things that everything is now fair play. TMJ is free to get this wave of players to boost up the levels of the national team, and he's prepared to show those documents on those 7 players, which of those parents or grandparents from either side of the parental lineage to have come from Malaysia or Malaya that led to him becoming a Malaysian national team player. Even though this current group's background is more obscure than the rest of the heritage players who have previously played in the past decade, whose backgrounds are really clear without dispute, without question. And that's where that tricky part begins. And one thing about naturalization, it's never an easy process. People will call it as a shortcut, which in a sense is acknowledged as a shortcut to success. But success begets success. When the national team does well, it raises the profile of the nation in the wider world football stage, in the wider Asian stage also. It does raise the visibility of the nation's football to the wider audience beyond Malaysia or Southeast Asia. The orbit expands, people will know more about those nations, and once the world is aware of Malaysian football, that's when they will feel that legacy. I think what TMG is also looking for is rebuilding the legacy of Malaysian football, and to an extent his legacy, in which where he can say that what he has done with JDT, he's transplanting it in a way to the Malaysian national team. And when the Malaysian national team succeeds at an unprecedented level, perhaps even surpassing the era of Sojin An, Santokh Singh, Mokhtar Dahari at such unprecedented levels, that he can say that he has built the greatest Malaysian national team ever, that will please many Malaysian football fans, regardless of race, regardless of ethnicity, regardless of state, regardless of religion, regardless of whatever. It is getting one Malaysia united, and also it's also a signal to the Malaysian football authorities that they have to really speed up or catch up on their youth development to get more Arif Aimans on board, because right now only Arif Aiman is worthy of that starting 11 where it's majority foreign. Let us not kid ourselves on that. Only Arif Aiman. If Malaysia had produced 50 Arif Aimans, would TMJ have resorted to naturalizing those players? I doubt it. He'll be happy to see those 50 Arif Aimans, given the squad in depth, maybe Team Malaysia A, Malaysia B, whatever, to have such frightening squad in depth to frighten the rest of the national teams, even with heritage players, to scare them into retreat into their own goal before they even try to play. And having those players to boost up the levels is not a new thing either. Asia's top national team, Japan, actually did that route before. In the 90s, when it was starting up its professional J League, that was when it relied on the expertise of the Brazilian-born players. In Rui Ramos, who was instrumental in helping Japan win its first ever Asian Cup in 1992, and later Wagner Lopez and Alexandro Santos, also Brazilian. They were instrumental in spearheading Japan's campaigns in the 1998 and 2002 World Cups respectively. And because of their contributions, along with Brazilian icon Zico being influential in how Japanese football should be played in those early years of its professionalism, that's how Japanese football got so far ahead to the point that it's able to field a second string side and still demolish an Indonesian team filled with Dutch heritage players 6-0 at home, and to sweep aside almost every other Asian national team to reach their 8 successive World Cup finals in North America. But they had their beginnings with the Brazilian heritage link, which is due to the Japanese also immigrating to Brazil back in the late 19th century and early 20th century in support of the industrialization works and all that, and industrialization expansion and boosting the economy over that during that period. And so wrapping up all this in what is admittedly a rather challenging topic, exhaustive topic, for those Malaysian football fans who are still skeptical because of the unknown foreigners, the truth is TMJ is adopting a merits-based selection process, a relatively merit-based selection process, where it's not because of race, it's not because of which faction this player belongs to or the coach belongs to that one gets a slot, but is only the best players who fit into Klemoski's 11, his tactical plans, get to play, and those who do not fit in will be out. That includes other foreign-born players who come before those 7. So it's really raising the stakes. It's a risky raising of stakes, but it's also perhaps TMJ's only solution, because other methods have not yet succeeded or were still entirely failed because of stagnation. That's why TMJ chose this route. If TMJ had had 50 Arif Aimans available for the national team, local born, bred, regardless of race, ethnicity, faith, he would not have taken this route. But he took this route because he can't stand Malaysian football being at such a low level. Given how much JDT has progressed in Asia, he now wants Malaysian football to reach at a similar level as how Johor Darul Takzim has done. It's a very new venture, but given the experience he has had with Johor Darul Takzim, TMJ wants to bring this boost into the entire Malaysian football ecosystem as a whole, starting with this, and partially with his personal legacy. But still, it indicates how much more Malaysian football needs to catch up. The previous batch of heritage players has brought Malaysian football from here to here. TMJ wants to bring it up to here. So with this naturalization and heritage players issue, it is an evil necessity for Malaysian football. Where other methods have not worked, this is probably the best route Malaysia has at this moment. Even when the veterans of the glorious 70s and 80s period disapprove, which is acknowledged here, because they do still believe in local football, local born players being put first to represent the national team, for they are also the blood of the land. They are also part of the land, that they believe that only those who are local born should represent the team, because they will feel the conviction of playing for the flag a lot more than the so-called mercenaries. And with that, a shift in mindset has to be adjusted. Some will not budge because of their background or where they come from. Some will feel like, what is happening with this, especially with this new lot. The previous batches of foreign players, foreign born players, they understand, because they have played for the team for a substantial period of time. They have proven through their parentage, grandparentage, or even even by staying in Malaysia for 5 years and more, to prove his commitment to the nation, to the flag, to the jersey, national jersey in which he wears. And while this topic is not going to end, it's not going to stop after this video, but I think there's still plenty of food of thought. How do we get the rest of the football ecosystem, the Malaysian football ecosystem, the youth system, which has been stagnating, is neither here nor there in Asian youth football competitions. In the ASEAN level, it's not even yet among the best in the regional youth international competitions. And with Indonesia being dominant in the recent SEA Games, with all local born players, no Dutch born players in that 2023 SEA Games to win that gold medal, with a stronger mentality than the Thais, who somehow are showing weaker mentality in their squads these days. This infusion of those 7 players this year is probably the wake-up call, the kick at the butt, that Malaysian football does really need to raise football standards everywhere, to make Malaysian football proud again, to make all Malaysians feel proud of Malaysian football for their jamun gemilang in the future to come.